everybody, Going Dodger here. Welcome back to Automation. We are continuing on in our American Engine Recreation mini-series. Today we're going to work through some Ford motors. Previously we've done Chevy, we've done some oddballs. These Ford motors, however, are something that are complete oddballs to me. I grew up as a quote-unquote Chevy guy, mostly through the influence of my dad, who has always owned Chevys as long as I've known, and I just primarily circled around Chevys, so I didn't have much exposure to what Ford had to offer. I have been doing quite a bit of research on some motors to try and get some solid information, since it's not stuff that I know about. It's been difficult. It's weird. Obviously it's harder because I'm starting with the old motors, and when you're talking about 60s, 70s motors, the information was not published as well, and it was harder to know. Like, the dyno numbers were probably not as accurate as they are today, and obviously there was no internet or anything like that, so all of these data values were just written down in a book somewhere, and not all of them have made their way to the internet, and it's just made it overall challenging to get some concrete answers on some of these questions I have before I start one of these recreation builds. But the first one I'm going to start out with is the 1969 Boss 302 motor. Now, this motor is a quote-unquote hybrid, but not your Prius hybrids. It's a Ford Windsor block. Now, that's a pretty well-known, popular name, but it's a Windsor block with Cleveland heads on it. So both of those names are pretty synonymous with Ford V8s. Both good and bad. They made, their run-of-the-mill motors with those series, and their muscle car, bizarre hybrid motors like this with those motors. So I chose this one because it had good information about it, or decent information about it. It's from an era I really like, which is the Trans Am battle era, where you had Ford, Chevy, and Chrysler all going head-to-head with muscle cars road racing. That's really cool, and I doubt we'll ever see an era like that again with big factory-backed programs. So obviously this is a V8. Now, this 69 would follow the 5-liter format of Trans Ams, so it's going to be a 5-liter motor of cast iron block, 102 millimeter bore, and a 76 millimeter stroke. Wow, that's the quickest I think I've ever gotten one of those. Okay, the crank. The crank I have listed as just a regular cast iron. The connecting rods, however, are forged, so we're going to go forged H-beam. And the pistons I have listed as forged, but that could have been not true. But it seems weird to me that they would put forged connecting rods in there and not go ahead and put forged pistons in, so I'm pretty comfortable doing that. These motors were created not to be street motors. These motors were created basically to cheat at Trans Am. You had to make a street motor to use the engine, so they made these and shoved them in some Boss 302 Mustangs and said, hey, we offer these to the public, and then they went off and raced them like they actually wanted to do. This is a pushrod motor. Obviously 2 valves per cylinder there, cast iron heads. Compression ratio. Compression ratio is one of those things that we're a little secretive about. I've found in people rebuilding these motors, they have found them to be about 10 to 1. Now, these are street motors. In this era, insurance companies were penalizing companies for making engines that were over 300 horsepower. So they would detune these street motors, and then when it came to the actual Trans Am motors, they would skyrocket them to probably, a 12 to 1 or something crazy like that. And they were making upwards of 450 horsepower and obscene, 8,000 RPM numbers. So when I say this is that motor, This is the street version of the motor, because that's the one we have numbers on. The Trans Am motors, Lord only knows what kind of numbers they were making. No, they wouldn't release that kind of stuff to the public because they didn't want Chevy or Mopar or anybody else to know. So that's what we're stuck with. Let's see, I have not reduced the year, so I need to do that. Let's see if 69 will give us what we need. Whoop. Everything looks good in here, and the bottom end looks fine. Okay. Okay, so let's see. I think we'll go with the Find. We'll go with the Find, and is there a blue? No blue? Come on, guys, we need a Ford blue. Alright, we'll go with the aluminum Find, because it did have aluminum valve covers. I did read that, so how fitting. Yeah, there we go. Aspiration, naturally aspirated fuel system. This is another one that was a pain in the butt to try and figure out. The carburetor that's on it. It is, as far as I can tell, a 4-barrel carburetor. What I read was, on the street cars, this carburetor was dramatically oversized for this motor. So it was putting way too much fuel and air. It was pumping way too much for this motor. Especially off idle, it would bog down a lot, and they actually had a lot of issues with it in the street cars. Basically, it was all throttle or no throttle. So I guess that's not really that big of a problem now, is it? Alright, so put a performance intake on there. We'll go with super leaded. Another thing I read. Oh, sorry, that was for the next motor. Disregard that. Okay, the fuel mix. We'll go with 13.2. That seems to be a safe number, especially for these leaded motors. So let's see. Ignition timing. We're probably going to need a pretty good amount of timing in this thing. RPM limit is high. High for a motor this size in this era. As high as 6,500 is what I've read. So that is what we will go with. It just uses a regular short cast header. We'll go dual exhaust. I will do 2 1/4. Again, we're only making 290 horsepower, so no need for anything too crazy. Let's see, just a single reverse flow is what I'm going to do on mufflers. Alrighty, so we're looking for 290 horsepower at 5,900 RPM and 290 foot-pounds at 4,300 RPM. I think we're going to be pretty close. I have a good feeling about this one. And those good feelings were met with parts exploding and numbers that are way too short. Engine failed the valve float. So once again, we're going to have to go up on the quality of the valve train significantly. 93.9. How are we on octane? We're a little high there, so I'm going to take some timing out. I'm probably going to put some cam into it as well, because it looked like our horsepower is short. So hopefully that gets us in the right range. Whoa, way high on torque. Way high. Oh, but perfect on horsepower. We're still running into valve float issues at high RPMs. So I'll max this out, 15, and I'm going to reduce us down to maybe 6,300 since we're not making too terribly much horsepower up there anyway. The torque is massively high. So let's go up to a 55 on the cam profile. Let's see where that takes us. Okay, that sounded a little better. The numbers look high, don't they? Yep. Still having valve float issues. I can really step this back to 6,000 and not affect its performance. Let's see. Yeah, that gets rid of that issue. So yeah, numbers look high. Yeah, that's because they lied. They lied a lot. Like I said, if you were producing a car that made more than 300 horsepower, they were going to raise the insurance rates on the car. So what they would do is just lie, and it would help sell their cars because people would rather hear that it has 290 horsepower than pay more for their insurance. So yeah, I'm going to say that 341 foot-pounds and 311 horsepower, probably a realistic number for this motor. What else do we have to cover? I think that is about it. Everything looks pretty good. It's lasting not terribly long. So let me do this real quick. We'll do the Boss 302. Let me put Ford Boss 302. Okay. I just want to experiment just for a second to show you what I mean about the true potential of this motor, and what it was probably doing in an actual race configuration. The numbers I saw were in the 450 range, so let's just see real quick if we can get it into that range sensibly. Okay, so now we are knocking. I don't think I have any better fuel available. What I read is that they were actually using 100 octane super leaded. 100 octane. That's really high, so not much I can do there. Try enriching it up, and I can get even more cam profile to balance it out. 92, but now we're starting to outflow everything here. So let's see. Put some tubular exhaust on there, straight exhaust. What else can we do? Race intake. Give a quality bump there. Interesting. We're still being pretty much limited to that 300 range. What else can we do? Well, you see that real low rev limit is what's killing us. I bet you if we jumped that back up, I just don't know how you would get the valve train to ever survive. So yeah, it's still valve floating. So let's see what happens if we bump the gear a little bit. No better. So not really much we can do there. That just goes to show how I guess the term I want to use is high-tech these engines were. And they were really pushing some boundaries with these motors to make 450 horsepower out of a 5-liter V8 in this era. So very impressive what they were pulling off. So let's forget about that little experiment for now. That's something I do want to come back to later, is doing some actual like legit racing motors. But for now I want to stick with these kind of street car motors. What I want to move to next, let me start with the gear. We're going to go with the 1971. We're going to stick with that Boss label. I'm going to go with the Boss 351, also known as the 351 Cleveland. So the motor I have picked is the 351 R code, which is found in only the Boss 351. So pretty much a one-off motor. It features a V8 cast iron, and the bore is the same as we've seen before. 102. Let me do some math here real quick because I don't have the millimeters on this motor, so let me see. Okay, so the bore and stroke, it's a 4-inch by 3.5-inch motor. So that's 101.6 by 88.9 millimeters. And that gives us a 351 plus some change. Now this motor is now the last motor we did was Trans Am kind of oriented. This motor is more NHRA and NASCAR oriented. So you see the bigger cubic inches, they still kind of stick with that formula today. But we got some serious high performance stuff going on the bottom end. We got a forged steel crank, we have forged H-beam connecting rods, and forged pistons for sure. Like, that is legitimately what it had. We're gonna go fairly high tech on the bottom, or fairly high quality, I mean, on the bottom as well. Push rod. Again, we need to crank that quality up to get it to survive. Cast iron heads. Compression ratio, I do have a concrete answer on this one. 11.3 to 1. Cam profile. Gonna go pretty stout. Go up to a 60. No VVT, no VVL. Obviously, I'm gonna do that same kind of finned look with the. Let's do chrome. They look fancy. Fancy. Alright. Aspiration and a fuel system. Carburetor. It's a 4-barrel for sure. Single carburetor. We'll go with performance intake. Now, here's the problem. These motors were recommended by Ford to use 100 octane super or premium leaded fuel only. This motor was produced right about when that fuel went away. So a lot of these motors had issues and did a lot of exploding because people couldn't find that 100 octane, and they would just knock and burn pistons and bad things would happen. All we have available here is 93.1. I don't think this game offers 100 octane loaded at all. The only thing you can do is go up to modern day and get 95. I think that is as high as it will go. Yes. So I might have to do some trickery here to get this sucker to live. But we'll go back to 71. Try that super leaded. Fuel it up pretty strong. 13 to 1. Pull quite a bit of timing. The rev limit is 6,100 RPM. Exhaust is short cast. Dual exhaust and 2 1/4 sounds good again. No cats. And we'll do reverse flow and no muffler. So that is the basic configuration of a Boss 351 or Windsor 351C type barcode. Okay, so we are looking for 330 horsepower at 5,400 RPM, 370 foot-pounds at 4,000 RPM. Those numbers sound much more realistic, and I think we should be able to hit them. Though we're going to run into some knock issues, I can just tell by the chart. Oh, maybe not. I didn't hear it anyway. 94, yes. So bottom end is reducing the MTBF due to an RPM limit, and the engine is knocking. So did not run into valve float issues, which is nice. And we do need to maybe give it a little bit more cam profile and pull a little bit more timing. Bottom end, increase that quality as well. And let's see how that reacts. Short on the power. That's probably because we have pulled so much timing, and it is still knocking. Wow. I will pull even more. Quick test here. Oh, that actually pulled us right into our range. Cool beans. Let's see, 93.1. Is that all we have to work with? Yes, that is exactly right. So that was easier than expected. I like that. That's a nice change of pace. Here we go, Boss 351, or as I'm going to call it, it's actually called the Ford 335 motor. Why it's called that, I have no idea. That is just a family of motors it is considered to be part of. And this is the Cleveland 351C. That's quite the name. There we go. Alrighty, so there's 2 older 4v8s in the books. Next time we're going to move up a little bit into more modern engines, which should go a little easier, and hopefully I can get to be a little bit more knowledgeable on, because there's more information available for them. So look forward to that in the next episode. But as always, my name is Dodger, and thanks for watching.